Let's get to Turkey. There are major protests in every big city in the country right now. And it all started when Recep Tayyip Erdogan recognized his influence and his prominence and his power was waning and decided to arrest the most popular leader in the opposition parties, the governor/mayor of Istanbul, Imamoglu. And he did this by claiming that him and I think 25 or 27 other class members of his actually got their college degree through illicit means. It's all bullshit. They forced the university to revoke their certificates, their diplomas, and then they arrested 100+ people initially that they had declared supporters of Imamoglu. It was all established. It's all a lie, for the record. In Turkey, you can't become president or run for president without a college degree. I think it's a silly thing in the constitution to begin with, but and Recep Tayyip Erdogan's degree itself has been called into question on its legitimacy. It's like a little... It's basically like an open secret that he doesn't have a real diploma, but it is a prerequisite to become the president. And previously, I believe it was, the premier initially. And since Turkey is now a constitutional, it went from a parliamentary system to a presidential one. Now it's the president that has always needed it, but now it's like the top office in the country because of a referendum that Recep Tayyip Erdogan pushed for after implementing martial law after the coup. Anyway, I don't want to get too far into the weeds. Having said that, this opposition is not united on ideology. There are communists, socialists, Kurdish revolutionary groups. There are even some nationalists in the opposition, like breakaway parties from the ultra-nationalist party. It's a very unique opposition that comprises close to 50%, if not a little bit over 50% of the country. Erdogan's coalition government, on the other hand, is comprised of the ultra-nationalists, the MHP, and Erdogan's own party. However, Erdogan's popularity has obviously dropped tremendously due to hyperinflation and many other issues. And in that process, Erdogan recognizes that his time in office is coming to a close, and fearful of his future prospects, he is turning around and illegally arresting a whole bunch of people. Erdogan also seized the assets of Imamoglu and claimed that they were also doing criminal activity, and also arrested a bunch of people that were sympathetic to Imamoglu, journalists and academics alike. Mass suppression is taking place in Turkey. Suppression has always been a tool that Erdogan has utilized in the country, for the record. Not new. There's no free speech in the country. Erdogan himself actually went to jail once, ironically, for reading a poem. And he has loved the lack of free speech since he's risen to power and has been in power for the past 22+ years.
It's imperfect democracy seemingly sliding towards elected dictatorship.
Üzülerek söylüyorum.
Istanbul's mayor is Ekrem Imamoglu. On Wednesday, his wife filmed him getting ready to hand himself over to police waiting outside his home. "We're facing great tyranny," he said, "but I will continue to fight against the person using this whole process as a tool against me." The person he has in mind is President Erdogan, in power for 23 years and winner of multiple elections, though the press and all the instruments of state seem to have succumbed to his...
Yeah, that's why I say, listen, you need to understand something. Turkish elections are usually not fair, but they still are real elections. And it's important to understand that, regardless of what people say, because it's important to understand that he does have popular support. He will rig the elections in his favor by using the media and through other methods of political suppression against his opposition. But at the end of the day, there is real support, at least across the 50% boundary for him and his coalition. That's why he had to make a coalition, by the way, with MHP. Having said that, right now, ironically enough, this is probably the most popular he has ever been in terms of foreign policy, especially with the Ukraine stuff, especially with Syria. And yet, this is the least popular he's been in the country. So I think that's the reason why he used the goodwill that he got from European leaders who are like, "Oh my God, you did a fantastic job with the Syria stuff. You packed that shit up so neatly." and you're saying, you're going to support Zelensky. He used the lack of interest that Western powers will have in basically saying, what the fuck are you doing to Erdogan? And I haven't really seen a lot of Western leaders criticize him for these insane actions, by the way. But he used that moment of opportunity to present, to basically engage in political repression, supercharged in a way that is even unique to him. And he's been doing this for a very long time. So if you're wondering why European nations are not talking about this, is because he has a tremendous amount of support from European leaders right now, because he's like saying he's the protectorate of NATO. He's the protector of NATO at a time when Donald Trump is undermining NATO, right? Erdogan has always used his foreign policy acumen to his advantage to manipulate European politics, whether it be engaging in the destabilization of Syria and then, having his armed militants like his Salafist brigade overtake alongside HDS the Syrian government and occupy it, and then linking up with HDS, or whether it be entertaining 6 million Syrian refugees previously that escaped the Syrian civil war and offering them refugee status in the country, with the only purpose, not because he's a humanitarian, mind you, but because, one, he wants to be the leader of the Ummah, the entire Muslim world. He loves that. He loves when people glaze him for that. But more importantly than that, he did that specifically so he can use the refugees as a bargaining chip. One, to directly get funds from European countries that he will fill his coffers, his own personal coffers with, which is exactly what he did. And two, because you can use those refugees as a threat. Anytime Erdogan feels stress from European leaders, he'll say, I'm going to drive 6 million Syrian refugees to the Greek border, and they're going to be your problem now. Make no mistake. While I do agree with the actions, and I certainly find myself at odds with the coalition's opinion on the refugee status of Syrian migrants, because I ultimately believe in humanitarian aid and opening up your borders to people who are escaping political instability and violence, I still recognize where Erdogan is coming from, what the motives are here. Having said that, because of the incredible amount of support that he's garnered in the past couple of months due to his actions in Syria, I think he saw an opening to pounce on his opposition that is very likely going to thwart him and kick him out of power.
Authoritarian will. But the arrest of Mayor Imamoglu looks like a new low. This evening he was taken to Istanbul's state security court with around 100 others accused of corruption and supporting terrorism. And it may be no coincidence that tomorrow he was due to be nominated as a presidential candidate himself. This was the coastal city of Izmir last night. Along with Istanbul and Ankara, it has an elected mayor from the main opposition party. Turkey has a history of military coups, but these protesters see what's happening as a political coup. Turkey's president going to war with his main political rival. Mr. Erdogan is...
Yeah, he cooked them before he even could fucking run. Also, I do want to point this out. Elon Musk claims to defend free speech, but today he enables authoritarian censorship in Turkey by blocking access to critical accounts on X. This is a global issue. We call on journalists, activists, and the public worldwide to hold him accountable today. While Twitter is one of the few outlets that people can show political discontent, and Elon Musk is gladly banned opposition accounts. Like I said earlier, the Turkish government has also stopped most broadcasters from showing the protests and the discontent altogether. Turkish chatters, I told you, European leaders are weak right now, and they rely on Erdogan. They're worried about Trump. They're stuck between a rock and a hard place. They will never criticize Erdogan right now. America, I don't think, gives a single shit about Recep Tayyip Erdogan anyway. He can do whatever he wants. Trump likes him.
He said he will retire in 2028, but he could engineer an early election or a constitutional change to stay on, presenting himself as an alternative to this week's unrest.
Bir yolsuzluk operasyonu bahane edilerek
They are trying to create turmoil on our streets, using an anti-corruption operation as an excuse. We won't allow a hand
Türk dünyası yüzyılı. Oh my God. Erdogan is such a goddamn chameleon that he went from liberal, Euro-focused privatizer, pro-capitalist privatizer, to expanding the welfare state at times when necessary, to Islamist, who has never really changed trajectory from being an Islamist, to to now pan-Turanist, who will also restore the caliphate. He's going to restore the caliphate and he's a pan-Turanist at the same time. He is literally everything. But more importantly, he is a watermelon salesman. He's done it all. He's been everything. You could call him at times a social democrat. You could call him a European liberal and a privatizer of state enterprise. That's how he came into office initially. You can do the political compass memes for him. Now his administration is pro-Kurdistan. Not really, but it's wild. It's wild that he is both simultaneously an ultra-nationalist and a pan-Turanist, but also saying, you know, we're going to get Abdullah Öcalan out and he's going to do a call. He's going to tell all the Kurds to put down their arms, to lay down their arms. He's everything. He's everything and more. That's why he's been in power for 22 plus years.
Handful of incompetent, ambitious individuals to attack the peace, to provoke our people, to terrorize and cause worry in Turkey.
Ekrem Imamoglu, who is 54, won't go quietly, telling counter-terrorism police that he faces unimaginable slanders against him. He's also been stripped of his university degree, which prevents him from running for president. Though his party leader, who now sleeps in the mayor's office, says a proxy could run instead.
If he is unable to apply, then somebody else will be a candidate instead, and they will win. If he faces a political ban, we will turn the next election into a referendum to remove it and set him free.
Turkey's president was today attending to affairs of state. A 21st century sultan who has put his country on the geopolitical map, mediating in conflicts from Syria to Ukraine, and unlikely to face much pushback from President Trump during a trip to Washington planned for next month. Istanbul is home to 16 million people. The question is whether these protests on behalf of their mayor will grow, or whether Mr. Erdogan...
I mean, dude, look at this. This shit happens in Serbia. This shit happens in Turkey. This shit happens in France. It happens in South Korea. It never comes close to this in a lot of Western nations. Like, it never happens like this in the United States of America. And I think that's part of the real reason why you never see, like, the level of political repression that these administrations engage in here in the United States.
Erdogan is now so ruthless that he orders whatever it takes to reassert control.
Is the opposition a better alternative for Turkey? Yes. While I certainly have my criticisms of the opposition, especially like the leadership roles within the opposition, I would, yes, 100% yes. First of all, even if they're corrupt, they're not going to be able to be as corrupt as Erdogan. It is virtually impossible for them to be as bad as Erdogan and as corrupt as Erdogan. It's just not possible because he is one of the best in the world at both of those things. And when I say that, I mean like it's like him, Vladimir Putin, you know what I mean? Like there's a handful like few people on this planet that are able to command such large economies as if it is their own personal as if it's their own personal wallet. Like I always say, when people talk about North Korea, right, they're like, oh, it's actually entirely because of the Kim family and like their corrupt dynasty. And that's the reason why the people are so poor. It's like, no, it's the sanctions, right? But with Turkey truly is one of the few places where you can make the argument that like one family and their besties are almost entirely responsible for all of the pain and all the struggle that people experience. Now, having said that, has he also been responsible for the expansion of the welfare state? Absolutely. It's interesting because people get mad at that and they're like, oh, he's just like winning votes. I don't have an issue with that. The issue I have is that he has created this political machine that basically relies on people going out and voting for him. And that's the only way that you can get the financial aid necessary to survive, while also simultaneously doing the worst building practices, as we saw some of the implementation of said awful business practices and rampant corruption within the party structure that had a devastating impact on the infrastructure in the aftermath of the massive earthquake in Turkey, which he still won an election afterwards, after that violence. Protestocu bir genç plastik mermileri aldırış etmeden polis politikanın önünde şınav çekti. Vay be. He's one of the protesters were doing push-ups in front of the cops as they were peppering him with less than lethal bullets. They're literally shooting him. This is why we say ACAB is universal, by the way.
And just finally, I mean, Donald Trump is rearranging the geopolitical furniture everywhere with his actions and his pronouncement. Is President Erdogan taking any inspiration from the way that President Trump is behaving?
Yes, I think President Trump's return to the White House had a huge impact on the way foreign autocrats behave. In the past, there was a slight concern in Ankara about how Washington might react to these repressions. Not anymore. So that's number one. Number two is Trump's return to the White House has created this vulnerability among European capitals. They think that they are now all alone, trying to defend themselves.
Yeah, and Erdogan has the second largest military in NATO, and the more he says he's pro-Ukraine, the more European leaders will go, okay, you can do whatever you want. We don't like it. We think you're barbaric, but we can't say anything.
Against an aggressive Russia without American help, which forced them to engage Erdogan. So there is now a political climate, international political climate, where the West really doesn't want to see.
Like, as much as I despise Erdogan, the one thing that I will always give him credit for, even though I don't want to, is the fact that he is pretty conniving. He is very conniving. He's a very smart dude in both maintaining a level of support, no matter what, from his base, and also very good at managing being a regional power and the second largest and maintaining the second largest standing military in NATO. You don't stay in power for 22 plus years without doing that. I would say that the only difference between Russia and Turkey at this stage basically is that the opposition leadership is like an eclectic group of people that don't have any sort of like real ideological coalition beyond overthrowing Erdogan. But they are still a real opposition, and they represent the real 50+% of the population. As opposed to in Russia, the opposition is completely controlled. They are also at the behest of Vladimir Putin. That's the major difference.
He faces charges that include graft and aiding a terrorist group. Imamoglu denies all allegations against him.
Hesabı şöyle yaptılar.
His Republican People's Party condemns the move as politically motivated and say other prominent opposition figures were also taken into custody.
Very often, there is no rule of law in Erdogan's Turkey, and currently Turkey's jails are full of Erdogan's political opponents. Turkish constitution has a very vague terrorism concept. So
hey, Americans, when I said America is Turkifying at an alarming rate, this is what I was talking about, by the way. To all the dumbass like hogs that come in here and watch me to be like, you're so stupid, Hasan. It's based to like call anything and everything terrorism and like jail people. This is the product. You like that?
Turkey's government denies claims of targeting its political rivals. But on Friday, Erdogan warning against illegal calls from the opposition for protests, saying we will not give in to vandalism or street terrorism. Turkey's interior minister confirming dozens of protesters have been arrested.
And to the Turks who are anti-Kurd, just like I tell Israelis who are anti-Palestinian and not anti-Zionist, this chatter is correct. This behavior isn't new. Erdogan has routinely jailed Kurdish politicians on a regular basis throughout his tenure. Exactly. When you don't recognize that that shit is completely unacceptable, it will expand to your favorite political leader, and it will expand to you as well one day. And if you don't actually immediately start protesting against that shit when it happens, you are going to be facing a challenge that you will not be able to overcome. You're misleading people on Erdogan. Üzülerek yaşıyoruz burada. Opposition can't run this country more than a month. Turkey gets better every day. I guess US as well. Erdogan isn't even tiny bit anti-Kurd. You're misleading people on Erdogan. Oh, memleket, hometown, because he's capable to reach agreement with any group of the country. Yeah. We got Erdogan supporters. Reis'e laf yok. Reis'e laf yok. Salak herif. Oğlum dinliyorum. Ulan dinliyorsan aç kulaklarını iyi dinle. Eğer Erdoğan, bu CHP koalisyonu ülkeyi yönetemezse bir aydan daha fazla niye hapse atıyor Ekrem İmamoğlu'nu? Atmasın, kazansın, ondan sonra bok etsinler ülkeyi o zaman yani. Ondan sonra AKP geri gelir başa. Gurbette yaşamıyorsa piçim. Almancı mı sence? Yok değil bence. Almancı değil. Elazığ'dayım. Vay amına koyayım. Gurbetçi değilmiş. Antalya'da yaşıyorum. Kesin Almancı Türkçe bilen AKP'li mi olur? Is the opposition anti-Israel and aesthetic? No, Erdogan is anti-Israel and aesthetic. If there's one guy who actually has the power to shut off the entirety of the electricity grid of Israel, it's Recep Tayyip Erdogan. The very fact that it has not happened means that his opposition to Israel is purely aesthetic. Don't ever tell an Erdogan supporter that reality, by the way. They will get so mad. They'll be like, no, what are you saying? I remember when Erdogan himself was not so pro-Hamas as he is now, okay? Just remember that. And same goes for the opposition too. And same goes for all the weird fascists who hate Arabs in Turkey because they think they're superior to Arabs in Turkey. They think like, no, you don't understand. The Western world will welcome us with open arms because we are different than the Arabs. We're a Western nation. Yeah, right, dude. Europeans don't even like Polish people, and those motherfuckers are Christian. What are you talking about? They literally think you are exactly the same as Arabs. You're Muslim. That's it. You can say you're an atheist all day, every day. No American will ever treat you. No Westerner will ever look at you as a true European person. You are no different than the Hindutva fascists here in the United States of America that are pro-Trump, that are going to inevitably be deported by our fascist government. Every time I say this, Turkish people clip this shit and start posting it on every forum, and they get so mad at me. Initially, in the immediate aftermath of October 7, I yelled at the Turkish chatters who were telling me like, you know, that they're pro-Israel and Hamas, Palestine, whatever. And I told them that they're dogs, that their status will never be elevated in the eyes of Europeans, no matter how hard they present themselves as pro-Israel and how hard they say that they're better than Arabs. And they got so mad at me. But you want to know something that's very funny? Every single group that posted that clip and got mad at me is now openly pro-Palestine. Every single one of those leaders of the individuals that posted those clips, every single one of them is now unconditionally pro-Palestine. Many of their leaders literally lied about their initial defense of Israel. If you ask them about it, they'll go, oh, what do you mean? No, I was never pro-Israel. What are you talking about? Yeah. What happened? Ne oldu? Beni koyuyordunuz ekşi sözlüğe. Hasan Türklere köpek diyor falan diye. Koyuyordunuz beni ekşi sözlüğe. Bağırıyordunuz orada. Şimdi niye bağırıyorsunuz İsrail katil diye? Seviyordunuz İsrail'i. Ne oldu? Götünüze girdi mi o? Bana dönüp ondan sonra Batı'nın köpeği diyorlar. İngiliz uşağı diyorlar. Ulan Batı'nın köpeği İngiliz uşağı İsrail'i sever. Anyway.
Posting on X that at least 37 social media users were also detained for sharing posts inciting public hatred or crime.
Babandan dolayı FETÖ'cü diyorlar. Evet, o da çok komik amına koyayım. Bana FETÖ'cü demeleri en komiği. Hem bir yandan diyorlar ki topum ben. Çünkü tırnaklarımı boyuyorum. Ondan sonra FETÖ'cü diyorlar amına koyayım. Bu komik tabii, çünkü bir yandan Amerika'da da aynen bu şekilde bana devamlı laf ediyorlar. Türkiye'de de laf ediyorlar bu şekilde. Abi sana demokratlar ajanı diyorlardı en son. Demokratların ajanı.
Recep Tayyip Erdogan is turning Turkey into a... This is the funniest thing. Like, Israel Katz and all these people in Israel are so stupid that they think that Recep Tayyip Erdogan is like anti-Israel. So they're complaining about Recep Tayyip Erdogan. They're saying like, oh, he's an Islamist. He's an Islamist. He's turning Turkey into an authoritarian Islamist nation. And it's kind of funny that they're saying this because they themselves are so stupid that they don't understand the dynamic between Erdogan and Israel, I guess. or they're deliberately doing it in an effort to give Erdogan some ass covering, I guess. There is virtually no politician in Turkey that is like pro-Israel, okay? Openly pro-Israel, at least. Turkey as a nation state is super anti-Israel. Turkey, on the other hand, is a NATO nation state. Turkey is under the NATO banner. Turkey is a NATO country. Turkey has the second largest standing military in NATO. Turkey has American nukes in the Incirlik base in Turkey. Turkey has missile systems initially during the Cold War that were directed at the USSR. This is how the Cuban Missile Crisis started. It's ridiculous to assume that this country would not be pro-Israel in action. Erdogan is taking a Turkish state with scientific, cultural, technological, and economic capabilities and destroying it, eroding the legacy of Atatürk, who built a progressive and prosperous Turkey. Let's hope for better days, at Ekrem Imamoglu. This is Israel's Minister of Defense. Ekrem Imamoglu's account responds and says, I am returning your statement, which insults the flag of the Republic of Turkey and the president as it is. We have no need to receive lessons on democracy and law from those responsible for the suffering and deaths of countless innocents, including children. Yes, a brighter future is indeed possible when Palestine is free. There you go. If you think that like any popular Turkish politician is going to be like, yeah, I love Israel, you are deluded. You don't know anything about Turkish politics. You're out of your freaking mind. Every single one of these donkeys that initially were against the Erdogan regime, or even within the Erdogan regime, that despise Arabs, initially said lightly pro-Israel shit. There were even politicians that went in front of the Meclis and said, if you like Palestine so much, why don't you go fight for the Arabs yourself? I'll send you there. Every single one of them went back and are now unconditionally pro-Palestine, because unlike the Gulf nation states, I guess actually very similar to the Gulf nation states, I will say, where the public is incredibly pro-Palestine, the politicians have to also be incredibly pro-Palestine. It's exactly like the Gulf states when you think about it. I was going to say, unlike the Gulf nation states, where the public is pro-Palestine, but the leaders are not. No, it's the same dynamic. Every single country would love for the Palestinians to be completely wiped out. They would dream of a future where they don't have to, they don't have to deal with this any longer, where they can just like openly be aligned with Israel. But the only reason why they have to maintain, at least on the aesthetic side, this anti-Israel posture is because their population will overthrow them, whether they be the Gulf nation states or whether it be whether it be monarchies or whether it be an authoritarian leadership under the Erdogan regime. If they were to just actively say, F you guys, we love Israel, they're a Western nation, we want to be a Western aligned nation. But make no mistake, as I've said already, the notion that any Turkish politician is going to be like actively pro-Israel out and about is crazy. It's silly. Look at what they are doing, not what they're saying. But even then, what they're saying is never going to be pro-Israel. It's going to be pro-Palestine. That's not AI. No, it's not. It's a whirling dervish in front of the cops getting tear gassed directly. It's a disappointing day. Every day is disappointing. There will be no day of peace going forward, I don't think.
Respect the rights of peaceful protesters, after Ankara said it had arrested more than 1,000 people since anti-government demonstrations began last week. Tens of thousands of people returned to the streets across Turkey on Sunday in defiance of a ban on rallies. They're angry about the arrest of Ekrem Imamoglu, the mayor of Istanbul and a key political rival of President Recep Tayyip Erdogan. DW has been hearing from people on the streets of Istanbul.
Justice must be served. It cannot be this way, and it cannot continue like this. But we don't know what to do either. Everyone is conflicted right now. They don't know what to do, they don't know how to act. If I go to a protest, it's a crime. But if I don't, it's a problem.
Support for Imamoglu will increase. Instead of going to prison, he's on the path to the presidency. They put the man who committed no crime in prison. If he had committed a crime, then fine. You know, President Erdogan went to prison for 3 months in 1999. Imamoglu is on this path right now. We will protest like this. We can do it without breaking things left.
Why is Erdogan doing this now, 3 years out from the election? One, because Ekrem Imamoglu said he was going to run. He was going to announce his candidacy for the presidency. Number two, this is the maximum amount of support that he has from Western leaders. He has a lot of clout right now in the Western world. He has always been very clever at foreign policy, always. And I don't mean that that's a good thing. Just so you understand, make no mistake. He's just always been a very clever foreign policy guy, but that usually means very brutal. I mean, yeah, everyone is becoming more and more, everyone's becoming more fascist. Everyone's becoming more comfortable in their authoritarian tendencies. Countries are becoming more reactionary in general. Do you think him overcoming the CIA-backed coup has anything to do with clout in Western politics? No. That actually solidified support for him. That was the most internal support he ever had, understandably so, because the CIA-backed coup was literally using American fighter jets to kill Turkish citizens. You had tanks, you had Turkish citizens with guns overtake the parallel state that the CIA agent Fethullah Gülen had established within the Turkish government. And overcoming that was a major W for Recep Tayyip Erdogan. And everyone, like, that was the moment where his popularity skyrocketed again. Yeah, this is where Fethullah Gülen used to live. I say used to because he's dead. No, he died. He was a CIA asset inside the rural Pennsylvania compound where an influential Muslim cleric lives in exile. You can also tell he's a CIA asset because the Washington Post is writing about him in such positive terms. The coup failed. Erdogan got a lot of political capital after that. He got so much political capital that he actually implemented martial law and then put a referendum to change the constitution of the Turkish Republic to no longer be a parliamentary system and instead be a presidential system. And he won that referendum. People voted for it. But since then, Erdogan has still played ball with the Western powers. Now, I brought up all of this because America has still had levers of pressure that they can pull on the Erdogan regime, and they often do. They have endless amounts of court dockets that they can go back to, endless amounts of information that they can go back to with respect to Erdogan's corruption. The American government does not hate corrupt authoritarians. They love corrupt authoritarians because they can always start a lawsuit. The Southern District of New York is very famous for this. Whenever there is anything that Erdogan is doing, like maybe they're getting Russian missile defense systems, even though they're a NATO country, while simultaneously they are a part of the F-35 program, both on the manufacturing side, and they're slated to get F-35 fighter jets from the United States of America. Well, you can't have Russian missile defense systems and F-35 jets operate on the same platform. And then, because then, you know, Russians will take that information and have better missile defense systems against F-35s. So whenever something like that happens, as Erdogan plays both sides in an effort to come out on top, the American government will just pull one of the levers of pressure that they can. Because if you have a lot of weaknesses, if you're an outwardly corrupt authoritarian, then the American government can just so easily be like, oh, you don't want to play ball? Okay, well, we are going to seize all of your assets. And then they'll quietly pack up those court cases as soon as Erdogan plays ball. This is why I need people to understand. This is why I say no country operates on this planet without thinking about how America will react or how the Western world will react, even though the Western world is basically just the United States of America for the most part, at least until this last Trump administration. That allegiance is like kind of crumbling a little bit. It's probably on its last breath. So that is the reason why Recep Tayyip Erdogan is using the political capital it has in the Western world right now to do this, to eliminate a very popular political opponent. That's why it's happening right now and not 3 years down the line when the election will happen. For the people who are asking, do you personally think Imamoglu would be a good leader? Is he still right-wing like Erdogan or a liberal like Kemal? He is a liberal. He's a social democrat. And I'm sure that he would also do a bunch of corruption if he were ever to get power. The difference, however, is that there is no way for him to physically be as corrupt as Recep Tayyip Erdogan, which is precisely the reason why it's still the preferable outcome here. It's no different than having a conversation about like who gets to lead Gaza, right? Who gets to be the political authority in Gaza. These sorts of conversations, I think, ultimately are silly. It's like, yeah, no, he's not my favorite politician. I mean, he is pretty good overall, but it's just like there's nothing. It's not a Harris versus Trump. No, it's different. No. This is not like a Harris versus Trump situation at all. I don't even know how to describe it. Like, there is a tremendous amount of political repression that Erdogan has implemented in the 22 plus years that he's been in power. It's not even remotely comparable. Yeah, it's like Tim Walz versus Putin, kind of, yeah. Or Kamala Harris versus Putin. Hard to explain to Americans how American foreign influence works because it's by design kept hidden and complicated, I know. But as a Turkish person who also lives in the United States of America, I try to do my very best, but it's like impossible for Americans to fucking understand it. It's like every single Turk in my chat despises Erdogan, except for like the hogs, I guess. But if I were to ask them individually, like, would you rather have a CIA puppet like Fethullah Gulen run the country? They would say, no. That's precisely the reason why Erdogan actually gained popularity after the coup failed. It's impossible for Americans to understand this stuff, though. Impossible. That's why I try to explain to people, like, most countries outside of the periphery that are still, secondary Western aligned nations like Turkey, or especially countries in the Middle East, might have anger and resentment towards their leadership. Having said that, they would not prefer an American CIA puppet who is also cut from the same background as Erdogan.
Break them up. For now, at least, in spite these bans that have existed.
I don't think many of the Gülenist Turks see Gülen as a potential leader for the Turks. I don't think they realize there's a CIA-backed movement either. Yeah, they despise Gülen for the same reasons that they despise Erdogan, because Gülen and Erdogan come from the same group. It's the same movement. Yes, they parted ways, but it was initially the same movement. Turkish politics is interesting. The Kemalists are, by and large, liberals. A lot of the socialist movements in Turkey, a lot of the workers' movements in Turkey are backed by the pro-Kurdish movements. So in terms of like permissible politics in Turkey, in terms of like popular support and popular mobilization, a lot of that is done against the government on the boundaries of liberalism. And many of these liberals find themselves to be like European-style Turks. They despise Erdogan because of his Islamist conservatism, and they think Recep Tayyip Erdogan, understandably, because Erdogan has done this, they look at Erdogan and his movement as like a disgusting, backwards, regressive movement, which it is, to be fair. They think Erdogan is going against the Kemalist principles of like liberal, secular Turkey. Much like my criticisms of the Democratic Party in America and liberals in America, I have criticisms of the Turkish liberals as well. It's hilarious comparing Trump to Erdogan. Trump could have never outmaneuvered Kemalists like Erdogan did after 2011. No, that's fair. Yeah. No, you're absolutely right about that. Damn, Ninjammer, why the fuck do you know that? That's surprising. Are you Turkish? Turkish lives in a perpetual state of pro-European liberalism and nationalism, where they really want to be European, but when things heat up and EU tells them to fuck off, they come back to nationalist isolationism. Yes. Turks also will so easily be like, you are the servant of the British Empire, which is one of my favorite takes. İngiliz uşağı. Meanwhile, there's NATO bases everywhere. They will say, I am simultaneously a Fethullah Gulen supporter, but also gay because I paint my fingernails. And also will say that I am pro-America. I'm an American, I'm a pro-America guy. Meanwhile, I'm over here talking about how American influence on Turkish politics is the reason why Turkey is as as it is. Did Erdogan hit the Islamist button before or after the coup attempt? No, he was always an Islamist. He always ran on religious freedom. That was his shtick. He was like pro-European, pro-capitalist, pro-abolishing state-owned enterprises, but he also built his base. Dude, there are so many parallels with Trump, okay? It is so annoying to relitigate this shit because I grew up with it and then I watched it happen in 2016 and now I'm watching the second stage of it. When he came to power, he had to develop a base of support. That base of support came from all around the country of Turks, Muslim Turks who felt like they were being oppressed by the laïcité the forcible secular values implemented in the Turkish constitution under the Kemalist revolution. And he basically said, like, all of that is ruining the lives of Turkish Muslims. Like, they're repressed. They're repressed religiously. They're not allowed to be religious in public or whatever. It was true, though? No, I don't think it was. I don't think it is true. Well, there's some truth to it, but it's not as cut and dry as you present it. Because when you look at the outcome of that, like the hijab ban, for example, the initial hijab ban in Turkey, and him basically taking that out, saying that you can wear a hijab in public institutions, was seen as, from the eyes of the population of Turks that truly wanted to be able to express their religious freedoms. There was a hijab ban? Yes, of course. In Turkey, it was illegal to wear a hijab when you were working in public office. Laïcité. I have a complicated opinion on this because Turkey is a Muslim country. It's different than when it's done in Quebec. It's different than when it's done in France. It's a Muslim nation. Turkey, since its foundation, since its inception, has always been a secular nation. A secular nation that literally has, ironically enough, a religious ministry. It's very difficult to understand with a Western lens, okay? We have Diyanet Bakanlığı. It's a religious ministry. Bakanlık değil, Diyanet. Is it not a part of the government? I don't understand. Does it başkanlık o? Bakanlık değil. Senin ben amına koyayım başkanlık. I mean, yeah, it's a regulatory agency. It's like saying the Chamber of Commerce is technically not a part of the American government. It's not. It sounds like an American government, and it has a lot of influence within the government, but it's technically not a part of the government. It's the same shit. Anyway, Recep Tayyip Erdogan came in and took out the hijab ban that was very popular for his base and very unpopular for a lot of the anti-Erdogan coalition. This is important to recognize in order to understand the liberal attitude, the Turkish liberal attitude in the country.
I mean, there has been growing criticism particularly from the European Union, which has been voicing concern over the handling of the protests, as well as the arrest and imprisonment of Ekrem Imamoglu. But it has to be said that the influence of the European Union has very little these days, given the fact that
Why would that be unpopular? Because Turkey, by and large, pre-Erdogan, and its relationship with Islam is more complicated than you think. It's more complicated than you understand. In the eyes of many Turks, the I would say 50% anti-Erdogan coalition, they have a very different approach to Islam. I wouldn't even say as progressive as my approach to Islam and being Muslim, but close enough. And for them, that requires a decent amount of suppression of more conservative elements of Islam, forcibly by the government. And historically speaking, despite the fact that the Ottoman Empire was the caliphate, even their approach to Islam was quite different than the modern version that you see from Wahhabis, you know? It is significantly less tolerant now. The example I will use is the 18th century reforms that came in Turkey that literally decriminalized anal sex and homosexuality and homosexual behavior far before Europe ever even approached the subject matter. And that was done as a response. And even before then, it wasn't that, Tanzimat. It's a very different attitude from a predominantly Muslim country towards its own expression of Islam. Ironically enough, I think that there was a lot of response that divided the country with Erdogan's religious freedom movement. Like that created a counterculture against that sort of thing.
Turkey's largely given up on the idea of being a member of Europe, although President Erdogan today said that the European Union cannot survive without Turkey. And I think he was looking to the fact that Turkey has the second largest army in NATO, and Europe is increasingly looking to its own resources to defend against the Russian threat. So Erdogan believes he has more leverage over Europe than Europe has over Erdogan. But I think the one Achilles heel, or the one thing that major concern for Erdogan will be the economy and the financial markets. Ever since the arrest of Imamoglu, there has been a vast exiting of foreign investors, and the central bank has been forced to spend up to $30 billion defending the currency. How long they can sustain that is a key question, and that will be a concern on Erdogan, and probably a factor that he really will want these protests to come to an end. For the protesters, they see that as an opportunity to put further pressure on Erdogan over the imprisonment of Imamoglu.
Thank you, Dorian. DW correspondent Dorian Jones in Istanbul.
I don't know where this will go, but I don't foresee it being anywhere good. On the one hand, I don't care if people want to wear the hijab, okay, while they're doing their jobs. On the other hand, in Turkey, the expression of political Islam being brought to the forefront is not just about people getting religious freedoms to wear the hijab, but instead all of the accompanying forms of suppression that move Turkey away from being a secular or socially progressive nation. That's the problem. That's why I say it's complicated. It's like in the United States of America, Christian nationalists coming to power and saying, we have to do religious freedom. That's what Trump said, right? We have to do religious freedom for the Christians in this country, the Christians in this nation. We got to do religious freedom for them. And that religious freedom is not about it's not about offering Christians the freedom to be able to, do Christianity in public. They literally can do that. But instead, it's more so to suppress whatever Christians have decided is anti-Christian, like gay people, trans people. That's it.